we opened a store, and in our store, if you look at our store that did $300,000 the first year, for example, or $500,000, and we had $100 per transaction, that's 5,000, or I don't know how many thousands of customers that my wife and I served personally because we had no other employees. That was the best laboratory focus group you can ever dream of. And these customers were affluent men that really were vocal about what they liked, what they disliked, and how we should run our business, by the way, as a third. That part we didn't listen to. But they told us every day. And here's the kicker about what they said to us 1,000 times. The same thing. So even if we were like kind of stupid and dense, we couldn't avoid learning from these guys what they wanted.
Welcome to How I Made It in Marketing from Marketing Sherpa. We scour pitches from hundreds of creative leaders and uncover specific examples, not just trending ideas or buzzword-laden schmaltz, real-world examples to help you transform yourself as a marketer. Now, here's your host, the Senior Director of Content and Marketing at Marketing Sherpa, Daniel Burstein, to tell you about today's guest.
Perception changes everything. Think about many of the chores your customers endure in their lives, or you do personally. The perception of a chore is not a positive, right? Take shaving. Dragging a sharp metal object across your face every morning to meet societal norms, sometimes even drawing blood. Ouch, literally. So how do you turn something like that into a luxury experience? According to my next guest, that is the power of storytelling in branding. Here to share the story behind that lesson, along with many more lesson-filled stories, is Eric Malka, CEO and founder at Strategic Brand Investments and author of On the Razor's Edge, The Story of the Art of Shaving. Thanks for joining me, Eric.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So Eric is probably best known as the co-founder and CEO of The Art of Shaving. He's also the co-founder and CEO of Ingredients. And for the past 11 years, he's been at Strategic Brand Investments. Eric currently advises and coaches 7 entrepreneurs and founders at SBI. More than half he has invested in their companies. So Eric, give us a sense now. What is your day like as CEO?
Well, it's pretty flexible. That's how I design my work in this stage of my career, is to have a lot of flexibility. But basically, I have my morning routines. It's all about my mental and physical health when the day starts. And usually I have anywhere from 2 to 4 meetings scheduled with our CEOs, along with other responsibilities I have as, in my investments and other occupations that I sit on boards and so forth. But from a strategic brand investment perspective, I basically speak to my founders about, they're each in a different stage of their business. So these conversations range from scaling the business to turning around the business to raising capital. And I have a lot of fun just being sitting on their shoulders and walking along with them in this journey of entrepreneurship, which can be a lonely place, and a difficult place, an uncomfortable place, let's call it.
Yeah, I like that word fun. You don't hear a lot of investment managers, advisors, those types of folks, the people on Wall Street, those types of folks saying fun. They're saying things like, earnings and all that stuff.
There's no reason for me to do anything in my life at this point that is not fun, because I can pretty much choose how I spend my time. That's the real freedom I have. And to me, fun comes from 3 things. One is lowering my stress and the stress of the people I advise by giving them, my job is to lower their stress. If I can lower their anxiety, their fun goes up almost immediately. And the people I choose to work with, that's the fun part for me. If I choose to work with horrible people, my day is going to be horrible. But I always choose to work with people that I enjoy being around. And in the extreme cases, they're a lot of fun to be around. So, and the work I do with them is fun, helping them build their companies. I don't want to sit on the board of a Fortune 500 company. I want to be the advisor of a guy that's doing $1 million that aspires to do 20. That's really what gets me juiced up.
All right, well, let's take a look at some lessons from your career, how you got to this point, but also what we can learn from them if we unpack it. So you said your first lesson is about the power of storytelling and branding. How did you learn this lesson?
Well, that's a big subject. I mean, branding and storytelling is, they go hand in hand. One of the things I realized early on in our startup called The Art of Shaving was that my story and the story of Miriam and I really resonated with consumers and the press. And back then, storytelling was not as common knowledge as it is today. But the fact that we soon realized that our business model was really innovative, but what really resonated with the press and with consumers was the fact that we had started in our kitchen, this business. We had sold our car for $12,000 to start the business that I had, that we were both immigrants to this country. I was illegal for 6 years. I arrived on a Greyhound bus at the age of 17 to New York City with $100 in my pocket, 24 years, these were the first understanding that we have to lead with our story, that the founders are as important as the product that we sell.
Well, let me ask you, because you mentioned how things have changed and moved in this direction. I've seen that too. So let's fast forward to today. Can you give us a breakdown or perhaps even an example of what you look for in a story when you decide right now if you want to get involved in a company? And I'll give you one example real quick while you're thinking of that.
Sure.
I interviewed Diego Osorio, the founder and chief creative officer at Lobos 1707 Tequila, on how I made it in marketing. And one of his lessons was embed creative within your business model. And so that's why I like hearing what you said here, because that whole idea, embed creative within your business model, I think it used to be the way the world used to work, right? There was a manufacturer, let's say Gillette, they can make a lot of razors and make them really cheaply, really good. And that's all they did. They manufactured. And then they went to Madison Avenue and the Mad Men and they said, okay, here's our product, figure out how to sell it, right? But something I've seen in the evolution of business, and I think you were probably one of the early innovators of this, and fast forwarding to today, is it's not just, hey, we can make a bunch of stuff cheaply, efficiently, let's add a story to it. It's the story is baked into the brand and baked into the company from the very beginning.
100%.
So what do you look for? Give us a sense. What do you look for when you're deciding
first
whether
of
to work for a
all,
company?
I would say that before, on top of creativity is part of what I would put under the general umbrella of innovation. And to me, innovation is really the most important part of brand building. And creativity is part of that, but it's not the only part of that. I think what I look for in a story is authenticity, obviously. There's a lot of stories that are fabricated in marketing departments by people that have no relevance to the story about the brand they're selling. It's just the way they crafted that story, and sometimes it's even not true, or it's really so authenticity is really, really important in the story. For example, I've just invested in a company that's very similar to The Art of Shaving called Barbarino's, and Barbarino's is the leading luxury men's grooming brand in Italy, and we're bringing them to the United States with a lot of success. But the story goes like this: the great grandfather of our CEO, co-founder and CEO, came to America in 1910. We found his record at Ellis Island with his name on it. And he made his way to Boston, where he was working on, I think, railroads. And at night, he was 18 years old, by the way. At night, one day he found a box, and a box was all these barber tools of a barber that had passed away. And he started to learn how to cut hair and shave. And basically, they nicknamed him Barbarino, which in Italian, everything that is young is an ino, like bambino is a young person. So he became the young barber, and Barbarino's is now the brand name of this, who we believe is going to become the future leader in the world of men's grooming and the luxury space. So this is what I call authenticity. I think that's where I would start.
Let's unpack that authenticity. You mentioned that the truth in marketing matters now more than ever. So could you tell us a story of how you came across to figuring that out?
Well, I've always been extremely on it. First of all, I'm obsessively customer focused. You could call me a consumer advocate within my company, right? That's my pseudo title. So when you dig into that, when you start peeling the layer of what it means for me to be the advocate for my consumers, transparency is top of mind, right? Being honest with your customer, delivering quality, delivering service. But really, when we created ingredients, for example, ingredients was known for being radically transparent. We were the first brand to expose our exact formula to the consumer on the front of the bottle. Unheard of in the industry. It's usually a best kept secret and tucked away on the back of the bottle. So to me, that's where I would, that's how it evolved. But it was always about the customer.
Okay, let me ask you. This is probably the impossible question, right? But on How I Made It Marketing, we like to beat up these ideas to better understand them. And I've heard this word authenticity. It comes up all the time in How I Made It Marketing. It comes up all the time in marketing.
Yeah, it's not very authentic, right?
No, but you are telling your authentic story. But
it's a buzzword, man. It's a buzzword.
That's the thing I'm trying to get underneath, right? What it really means. So let me ask. I'm going to ask you the impossible question. I'll give you a second to think about it. Are there any times we should not be authentic? Right. And I'll give you a quick example. We had run a fun test with our CEO, and this is a little different. We're in B2B, right? Where it just so happened he was doing videos. He's up in Montana on a mountain. He was doing videos in a suit. So what he typically did. For some reason, he had to come back and record the video. He was just dressed like a cowboy. He's in Montana. That's how he's normally dressed. For whatever reason, both these videos turned out to work. So the team thought, let's A/B test them. So it's one in a suit versus his authentic self dressed as a cowboy. And we all were pulling for the cowboy, right? Everyone wants to dress like a cowboy, and the suit won. Now, again, this is B2B. Obviously, it's a little different than B2C in some of these things. But there's all this buzz around authenticity now. People talk about it. It's a buzzword. And just trying to understand it. Like, are there any times where maybe there are certain occasions where there are things we shouldn't be authentic on? Or am I just way off? It's just,
No, you're not way off. I think, it's a case by case. I mean, if being authentic is something that is not going to resonate, I think that wouldn't work. But you should always ideally lean in first to authenticity and be yourself. I'm always of the mindset that be yourself authentically. And if people don't like it, I mean, at least they don't like your authentic self. That's not resonating. I mean, that's okay. But I've seen so many great brands that became very successful because their founders were so authentic, but authentic in a way that resonates. If you're authentic in a way that's offensive or boring or anything like that, that won't work. And that's why not everybody is successful. But I think you should always lean with authenticity because especially in today's culture with access to information, people really appreciate honesty. And authenticity, transparency is at the core of building an honest relationship.
Yeah, let me ask you about authenticity and luxury, right? So I think you did something really interesting in luxury by, like you said, transparent ingredients, all these different things. But are there some times when luxury brands should hold things back to be more luxurious? So, because for example, I think of a lot of the high-end fashion brands and some of those brands out there. I don't necessarily look at those brands and think, ooh, that's authentic, right? I think they're trying to fabricate some world, right? You look at the, Vogue magazine or some of these things. Oh, they're trying to fabricate some world and create certain things here. But I don't see a lot of authenticity in the story of how that's made.
Well, I think they're being authentic to the original vision and the heritage of their brand, which could be 100 years old. Now, I have a weird saying, which is that if you want to lie, tell the truth. And what I mean by that is that you can craft your story in many different ways. I can tell you a true story that sounds boring, and I could tell you the same exact story that sounds exhilarating, right? So, maybe I'm leaving out a couple of details. Maybe I'm almost embellishing some details. I'm not lying ever. I'm always being truthful. But I think, if you're talking about haute couture, today I see them producing synthetic fabrics in Asia and selling them for thousands of dollars. Now, 30 years ago, you took a haute couture brand and it wasn't a natural fiber made in Italy or France. That was a no-no, but today it's an acceptable thing. But do they go and authentically promote that Prada bags are made in China, or that, they're not going to do that. That would be shooting themselves in the foot. So I don't know. That's all I have there.
Find that
I
balance.
guess.
No, McCann Erickson said the truth well told, right? So I think that's a key part of it.
The truth well told. Thank you. That's,
yes,
I'm going to
but
steal
I also
that.
do think, like what you mentioned, how with what you did with the ingredients. So when you talk about what some of these brands do, I think the challenge that happens is as a brand grows or as bigger companies get involved, then what happens? The investors come in, they start looking at margins and they start looking at these other things. And I think that's our job as marketers and as customer first, customer passion people to say, yes, we will get 3 cents more on the product if we do the synthetic fabric, but we have this high margin brand and it's because we invest more in ingredients or whatever it is.
That's right. And I'll tell you two things about that. One is something I completely forgot now, which is that we had a dilemma when we started The Art of Shaving, when we created our own brand, about authenticity. My wife and I are obsessed about ingredients. That's what we called our brand, ingredients. And we were always obsessed with ingredients and natural ingredients and pure essential oils. But deep down, I knew in my heart that the middle-aged men we were catering to couldn't care less what the ingredients were. So if we had led with that, which is our passion and which is the magic sauce, we would have failed. We realized that early on, the story had to be about something relevant to the customer, not relevant to us. And what was really relevant to the customer was achieving the perfect shave, not achieving the natural shaving, product shave. So we made that decision, and that was kind of a fork in the road in our storytelling. And we hit it out of the park by doing that. By focusing on the perfect shave as our messaging and not on the natural ingredients, which was our passion, we really made a big difference in our success. I don't think we would have been very successful trying to convince guys to use, pure lavender essential oil in their face every morning, right? But they did appreciate it, but it wasn't our story.
That's great. And it's finding the highest element of appeal in your value proposition too. You also mentioned that word of mouth advocacy can help you find your best customers. So how did you activate word of mouth? That's something we're all trying to do as marketers.
Well, I'm talking about the 90s and the early 2000s, right? So you can translate words from, today we call them influencers and PR. But, in our days, we could not compete with big advertisers. We could not buy a page in the GQ magazine for $30,000. We couldn't get a billboard on Madison Avenue. But we had a great story that the press wanted to talk about. The press, what we sell to the press are stories. Like we sell shaving cream to customers. The whole world of media became a customer to us that we supplied with good stories to write about for their readers. And we start learning about that again by accident. I'll tell you the story if you want to hear it.
Please.
6 months after opening our first store, which was doing about $10,000 a month in business, we were breaking even and we were kind of happy about it. But fast forward 4 months into starting our company in January 1997, I heard that a barber I knew in London, who worked for the brand we sold in the store at the time, was coming to Bergdorf Goodman to do a barber event. They used to do that to animate the store, to do an in-store event. I asked him if he would be willing to do a day event in our little store, and he agreed graciously. We sent out 400 postcards because we had only 400 names in our database. And we made this beautiful little postcard that said, come and enjoy a hot towel shave by London's foremost barber to the royal family and the prime minister, which was, again, it was true, he had a member of the royal family, but he was probably like the least important royal, member of the family, like a second cousin's roommate or something like that. But we crafted a nice email with beautiful imagery, and believe it or not, 25% of those cards came back for appointments. We had 100 appointments from 400 postcards. And that was pretty amazing. We asked him to do 3 days instead of 1 day, and he again graciously agreed to do that. One of the postcards landed on the lap of a young public relations person. She worked in a firm not too far from our store. She walked over and came to us. She spoke French as well, and said, I love what you're doing with this event. This is wonderful. I can sell the hell out of it to the press. Hire me and I'll do a great job. And we said, we have no money to hire PR. We didn't even know what PR meant at that point. So she says, listen, I'm going to do this event for free. If I do a good job, maybe you'll hire me. I said, yeah, well, 100%. You're in. Fast forward to the event. We had, I would say, 40 publications that covered the event, including CNN. I don't know if you remember Jenny Moss. She used to do these quirky 3-minute segments on CNN. She did one of our store. And then we were asked by the New York Times if they could have an exclusive before anyone ran their story. Our publicist highly recommended we agree to the exclusive. We had no clue what the New York Times was at the time. We had no understanding of any of that. We were really just very young and naive. We agreed to it, and believe it or not, on March 23rd, 1997, there was a 2-page article in the Metro section of the Sunday Times about our little tiny store. The next morning, my wife and I were to get married at City Hall because of immigration laws changing and all that. We had to rush to do it. And we decided we were going to go do it at 8 in the morning. And by 10, we'll open the store. As we turn the corner to get to our store, we see 8 people or 6 people in front of the store. Very unusual for a side street on Monday morning in the Upper East Side. They were waiting for us with little clippings of the article. And as I opened the gate of our store, I would hear the phone ringing. I picked it up. It was a guy from Dallas, and then call waiting, a guy from LA wanting to order product. Long story short, we did $10,000 that day, the same that we did in 30 days prior to that. And that went on for 2 to 3 months of just emptying the shelves, filling them up at night. Next day, mob scene, emptying the shelf. And we were just ecstatic. Our business completely blew up. And that was a direct impact of that event and public relations. I think today we call that going viral, right? Our little store went viral around the country and the world because of that New York Times article.
And it was on Madison Avenue, right? That's where your store was?
The first one was on 62nd Street between Lexington and 3rd. The money from that event allowed us to open a Madison Avenue shop, which was a pretty bold move. By the way, when you talk about margins before, my entire mission at The Art of Shaving was to increase my cost of goods sold, increase my selling price, and find the highest rent per square foot I could afford to sell my products in.
Let's talk about that Madison Avenue shop and the highest rent per square foot, because what I see now is, when we talk about making an impact with influencers, it's so hard digitally, and digital is infinite, right? And you do see some internet retailers now moving towards brick and mortar, Warby Parker, right? But there's other examples. So what can they learn from you when it comes to having a physical presence?
First of all, it's extremely validating to me because of 2 reasons. One is, for the last 13 years, I've been told that brick and mortar was, dinosaurs dying. And I was saying to them 2 things. One, no, retail is not dying. They're committing suicide. Secondly, you cannot have a war between online and offline. It's a marriage. You need both. And I feel very vindictive now that I've seen these digital native brands migrate to retail, some of which I've told they should do that too. what can they learn from us? I mean, I'm not going to teach Apple or
I'm saying like, if there's someone listening now and they have a digital only brand and they're they're like, do we open a physical retailer? And I ask because,
well, I'll tell you.
Go ahead.
I'll tell you, we're doing that with Barbarinos. Barbarinos, the way we brought them to the United States is by opening a store on Madison Avenue. Now, it might sound old fashioned, but the reality is that within the first 12 months of being in this country as a new brand, they've generated $1 million profitably. And we're going to be opening more stores, and that's going to be part of our digital strategy, because the digital native strategy, first of all, has become extremely expensive compared to 5-6 years ago before iOS 14. Secondly, it's really not a community building effort. It's also a very unprofitable business model for a long time. And we think we're moving into a more fiscally responsible era of brand building. And I think brick and mortar play a very strong role along with third-party retailers and the digital platform. So our strategy is for our digital platform, as we reach the $50 million mark, to be about 20% or more of that revenue, but half of it will be organic because of everything else we're doing profitably. Otherwise, it's very hard.
Right. And is there anything you do for the customer experience in that store we talk about word of mouth, make it go viral and some of these things?
Is there anything we do for the customer experience? Is there anything we don't do for the customer experience?
There we go. Okay.
That's the only thing that matters. Like, once you realize that there's nothing more important than your customer, then there's nothing more important than your customer experience. That's the number 2 level of that. And again, I always start and finish. First of all, I'm a shopkeeper at heart. And what I try to tell digital companies is you've lost touch with your customer to a certain extent. And you need to become a shopkeeper. It's not because you're digital or retail or you're working in a flea market. You're still a shopkeeper at heart. You have to embrace your customer. You have to hug your customer, not physically, but metaphorically. You need to hug. That was the famous Stanley Marcus book on retail, Hug Your Customers, right? So for me, customer experience was at the forefront of our company. By the way, I ran my company as an inverted pyramid, which means that I was the least important person in the company, being at the bottom of the pyramid, and my sales teams were at the top of the pyramid, and they were the most important people in my organization. And we were all here to serve them, to succeed, to serve our customers. So that drives everything for me. Being obsessively customer focused drove every single decision in my company. How we manage people, who we hired, how we hired them, how we trained them, what products we made, what locations we did. Everything was driven by that. And for me, if you were working in my warehouse packing boxes, you were in my sales department. If you were cleaning the bathrooms, you were in my sales department, because, my sales staff is going to go in there and it's going to be a clean environment. They're going to be proud to work here, and they're going to service my customers even better. So everybody was a sales. I built a sales organization basically. And I think that's a little bit of a lost art. A lot of people I consult with or advise, the biggest complaint is I don't have enough sales. And my first question is, do you have a sales department? Answer is usually no. You have a sales process? Of course not. I mean, what do you expect, my friend?
Well,
no, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, I'll say, we talk about, leading indicators and lagging indicators, and sales is a lagging indicator, and a leading indicator, and it sounds like you're saying this too, is customer obsession, customer first.
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
Well, so we just talked about some lessons from these things. some of the things Eric made. In just a moment, we'll talk about some of the lessons from some of the people he made them with. But first, I should mention that the How I Made It in Marketing podcast is underwritten by MechLabs AI, the parent company of Marketing Sherpa. You can get conversion-focused training from the lab that helped pioneer the conversion industry in the AI Guild and a community to collaborate with as well. Grab your free 3-month scholarship to the AI Guild at join.mechlabsai.com. That's join.mechlabsai.com. Okay, so we talked about, as I said, some of the lessons from some of the things you made. Let's talk about some of the people you made them with. You mentioned Miriam Malka. That last name should sound familiar. That's your wife. You built a company with her. And you mentioned that greatness is in the details. So what did you see Miriam do that you learned that lesson?
Well, Miriam, little did I know when I met her, she was just turning 20. She was 19 still. So I had no idea. She had not really showed her colors to the world, if you will. But I discovered little by little, at 22, she made our crochet bowl in our kitchen for me to, protect my skin, my sensitive skin. By 22, she had the vision for how our first store would look like and be the interior design, even though I gave her great limitations by giving her a budget of $12,000. And she became the ideal partner. And I think partnerships are a really important part of success, right? And our partnership was, again, she was obsessive about products and I was obsessive about customers. If you create incredible breakthrough innovations and you create incredible customer experience, I mean, your chances of failure are relatively low. So that was basically our partnership to this day. Products and customers. And for her, she drove us crazy. I mean, at first I wanted, to strangle her sometimes because she would drive us crazy with perfectionism. And mind you, perfectionism is a necessary skill for her job. But my job as a CEO is to know when to stop the perfectionism and take some heat from the creator, right? So if you let her go, the store will never look good enough to open or to launch. It will just never get there. So at one point I had to say, the pursuit to excellence has brought us to a great, point. Let's just go for it, which would make her pretty angry at me. But at the end, I knew as a CEO, I had to make tough decisions that were not popular. But she would go to the printers for our boxes. Our box had a circle around the logo that was made of gold foil that was very, very, that had to have the certain distance from the rest of the logo. And, she would detect things on the press that the printer would both appreciate for the sheer, obsessive nature of the person and also be frustrated because they're losing money reprinting boxes. But she would find little things. They would have to get magnifying glass to see it. And then they would say, you're right. We're off the tolerance. It's like, gee, she got us again. But at the end, I didn't appreciate that maybe when I was in my late 20s and struggling to make payroll. But the reality is that it was a really important part of brand building it can't be an afterthought. Just making a good product or finding a product that you can sell a lot of doesn't build brands. That builds an Amazon, shop, if you will. And you can be very profitable. You can be very successful, but you're not building a brand. It has to be said. To build a brand requires certain elements that are almost sometimes counterintuitive to building a company. So those are the things I've learned from her: is impeccable taste, attention to detail. She was, for the 12 years we ran our company, she was in charge of housekeeping for our stores and our offices. And I can tell you that 6 months after we left the company, we would walk by our stores and see dust in the window. And we knew that Miriam had not been on top of everyone for that reason.
That's painful. But I like what you talk about balancing, and I think this is what a lot of startups and founders and companies have to do, balancing that perfectionism with shipping, getting it out the door, getting the thing done. And so I wonder, what advice do you give to CEOs and founders and companies now to find that balance? Because on the one hand, we hear about, hey, get the minimum viable product out the door, just get it done.
It depends.
Right?
It depends what you're into. If I speak from the lens of luxury goods, and you don't get a second chance. If you're in tech, that's different. You can launch a first version and improve upon it. But as a luxury goods consumer, I would say that the lens should be something I heard at P&G once, which I thought was really cool. And it goes like this: always take a hard right, not an easy left. So when you're finding yourself taking an easy left, you're cutting corners, and that's dangerous. But if it's good enough and you're ready to roll, go and keep improving. If you see the first product we launched in 1997 to test the thesis that we could have a product with our store name on it, they look very different from the products we launched a year later when we had the confidence to go all in. So, yeah, I would say don't cut corners, but perfectionism is bad for business. It's good for creation. It's bad for business. So you need to have a balance. Again, it needs to be a tugging war. If my wife wasn't around, I'd be launching products way too early, way too sloppy. She pushed me so hard and I had to push back. It's that tugging war that gets the perfect situation, right? Is by saying, no, it's not ready. Yes, it's ready. And really challenging each other's position. That makes us really, it's the same notion that when people say, I don't want to be surrounded by people saying yes to me all the time, right? Because that really makes you sloppy.
Yes. And also, maybe do those people help you get in the head of the customer? So I wonder, how did you get in the head of the customer? You mentioned earlier about, they wouldn't care about the ingredients. Well, you mentioned they wouldn't care about the ingredients. They care about the shave. You mentioned your wife making the first pre-shave oil and testing with you. But I know, I'm looking at you now. I don't know if this was true back then. People won't see you. This is an audio podcast. You have a beard. So you don't seem like a big shaver.
Yeah. Listen, I'm a grooming guy. I'm not a shaving police, by the way. I'm not a shaving police. So I'm like most men. I don't enjoy shaving as much as the next guy. The difference is that my business, the shaving was an opportunity. My business was infused with my real passions about customers, about natural ingredients, about promoting health, about creating a great company culture where people enjoyed working in. That's why I was passionate about what I did. Shaving, couldn't care less. It could have been shoes. It could have been cars. So your question was, how did we find out? That's probably the biggest lucky break we ever had, which is the way marketers sometimes do it is they do focus groups to get into the head of customers. Well, we neither had the money, nor did we believe in focus groups, nor did we understand that we could do that back then. But we opened a store. And in our store, if you look at our store that did $300,000 the first year, for example, or $500,000, and we had $100 per transaction, that's 5,000 or I don't know how many thousands of customers that my wife and I served personally because we had no other employees. That was the best laboratory focus group you can ever dream of. And these customers were affluent men that really were vocal about what they liked, what they disliked, and how we should run our business, by the way, as a third. That part we didn't listen to. But they told us every day. And here's the kicker about what they said to us 1,000 times. The same thing. So even if we were like kind of stupid and dense, we couldn't avoid learning from these guys what they wanted. We heard the same exact thing from 80% of our customers. They said, do you have any products without fragrance? That every day. Do you have any products for sensitive skin? Every one of them. So what did we do? The first products we launched were fragrance-free for sensitive skin to achieve the perfect shape, right? So we heard them loud and clear, and we created the products and the atmosphere and everything to service that.
Well, I think
know your customer.
No, that's another great example of why a brick and mortar retailer can be very helpful. And also not only if you look at a brick and mortar retailer as this is what we look at it sometimes, how can we cut costs as much as possible to make a profit? It's okay, we're having all these customer interactions. How do we make sure we're getting this customer wisdom into one place where we're actually learning from them?
100%.
You mentioned you learned sometimes firing someone is doing them a favor, and you learned this from Boris Milgram. How did you learn this from Boris?
Yeah, Boris was our VP of retail. He passed away, unfortunately, years ago.
Sorry to hear that.
Thank you. But he was a game changer for my organization. When I went out to build my management team in 2005, one of the position was somebody to run retail. And I met a lot of people. And since I was a shopkeeper and I was running my stores for the last 9 years, I knew what I was looking for. And he was, first of all, extremely endearing personally as soon as I met him. But he started telling me all about customer experience. He was the first person I would hear saying the words come out of his mouth, customer experience. I mean, it's like the Jerry Maguire. He had me at customer experience. And he came from Neiman Marcus. He went up the ladder from the corporate ladder from being a stock boy that barely spoke English to running a $150 million store. So I hired him right away, and he taught me so many things about managing people. He took my culture that I was looking to create, and he blew it up. It was just a perfect fit. And people were so happy to work in our company, primarily because of the culture we had built, but because he was the in charge of that culture, right? Most of our employees were in the stores and selling. So he taught us a lot about how to hit the humanity of being an employer and managing people and really genuinely caring for your people. That's something he taught me. It's not just a textbook like, yeah, we need to do this because it shows that we care. No, that's not genuine. Showing that you care is nice, but caring is genuine.
Right.
And what we told our people in our store is customers are coming into your house. Just greet them. Just say hi to them and welcome them. Be welcoming and be genuine, because when people come into your house, they can tell if you're hypocritical, and definitely don't say, can I help you with anything? Right. So Boris really exemplified some of my philosophies, which were not completely clearly expressed by me, but is how I felt about, I always hated working for people, and I wanted people to love working for my company, which they did. And Boris made it an even more fun environment, more successful. I came up with a couple of phrases for our teams. One was happy makes money. Actually, one of my ex-employees made a beautiful work of art for a house and says happy makes money, because what it meant was, creating a happy environment for people, whether it's your customers, your employees, is going to generate more business. It's just a better way to go. And then Boris taught me, I think what you were referring to, we spoke about it earlier. I always have to fire people before I had a management team and hire people. So it was an uncomfortable thing. I hated firing people. I felt like I was ruining their lives, and I felt guilty for it. I had no choice. They really, they were really bad. I had to let them go, but I felt bad. And Boris, I remember the first time he fired one of our employees, and we had glass windows in our offices, and I looked, and they were basically hugging. I said, what, did you fire the guy? He's like, yeah, but, I'm doing him a favor. He's being unsuccessful here, and this is not the right path. And I'm giving him the opportunity to find the right path for himself and really work in a place where his abilities are going to be a fit for the job, and he's going to be very successful. And I explained that to him. I said, oh my God, this is like the greatest lesson in the world. Having somebody thank you for firing them is not a skill I've seen too many times in my career. So he was that kind of guy, and he was fun to be around. He used to have a bell every time we had a wholesale sale. He would rang the bell. And, these are little things, they seem insignificant, but it was like Pavlov. Every time I heard that bell, my brain lit up, and everybody in my office, the 50, 60 employees in our office, their brains lit up because of that bell. So these are some of the things he taught me. And customer experience was our blood brotherhood between him and I. We cared so deeply about customers. We would reprimand employees on purpose when they did something good for the company that was bad to the customer. That's just the way he was, and we really got along for that.
So I don't want to lose sight of that. That is a key lesson. When they did something that was good for the customer but bad for the company, you said
good for the company and bad for the customer. That's when they got reprimanded.
Okay. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, if they're bad, they would say, no, but we're going to lose money if we do this. Or if we take back that razor, it's 2 years old. And I'm like, dude, take the razor back. It's, we have high margins. I'm not going to get into the details. It's not costing us $200. And, you're killing one of our customers, Actually, what I taught my sales staff is the best opportunity to win a customer is when they come to return merchandise.
Why's that?
Because when a customer returns merchandise in the brick and mortar more than on the internet, they are face to face with the salesperson, and they come with a bag and they say, I have to return this for a refund. And invariably the sales staff feels bad. They're going to lose part of their commission. Their sales numbers go down. So it's an awkward moment. And when people are defensive or apprehensive and you make them really comfortable right away, they have a sense of relief, and you own them forever. I mean, you have a customer for life. And I used to play that game when I was the manager of the store, where customer came in and uncomfortable. I need to return this gift that I got for, and I was like, no problem. Let me see what you got. We're going to take care of you right away. And, then the conversation starts. Now we have a good relationship because I'm a great guy. He loves me. And my goal was to get him to buy more stuff, but I would happily take the return. I remember one guy in my first store came in with a broken razor he had bought months ago because he was tapping it on his sink, and it broke the head. $200 razor. And he wore ripped sweatpants, which was not fashionable in those days. Today it's normal. But back then, when you wore ripped sweatpants, you basically gave up on life and you're homeless, right? So I said to him, no problem. I'm going to give you a new one. Don't worry about it. We're not going to send it for repair. Here's a new one. He left the store so appreciative. He came back 50 minutes later and he said, my son's getting married. We have to get 10 groomsmen's gift. And he spent $3,000, which was a lot for us at the time. And he says, I love the way your customer service is amazing, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, oh my God, this is proof in the pudding right here.
Well, that's great. Well, so I like how you said how you would reprimand customers. I mean, that's a mistake your employees would make, right? When they were doing something that seemed right for the company, but wrong for the customer, which makes me think these brands you've worked across now, I think currently with 7, maybe 11 total brands. What is the biggest common mistake you see companies making today? What is the biggest common mistake you see them making? If you can kind of just,
as far as customers,
just in general, running the company.
Oh, in general, I mean, the failure rate is so high. And I think impatience is at the core of entrepreneurial failure. You need to have urgency when you want to succeed in life. There's no time like yesterday, but impatience is your worst enemy. And you see impatience unfolding in many areas of marketing. In every area of your business, you're going to see impatience cause mistakes, cause losing money. And the way you see it in marketing, for example, is, sometimes we overspend, the idea of testing under a microscope is lost, right? Test. And once you find the right model, go all in, but be patient. Building a company, it's what did I hear recently? go fast and fail fast or something like that. Finish fast, and what I tell entrepreneurs when I start working with them is, do you want to be successful in 15 years or less, or do you want to be failing in 5 years or less? You choose. Those are your two options. So for me, impatience, and it manifests at all levels. The second biggest mistake I see is not really a mistake, but lack of industry or business acumen. And you need to really develop that. If you are not an expert in an area of your industry, especially in my industry, in beauty and grooming, there's a lot of amateurs launching a brand because the barrier to entry is so low. And if you're doing that, you really need to get some expertise in your corner. Otherwise, you're going to be in for a long ride.
Yeah, that patience. Sorry, go on.
No, patience, man. Patience.
No, I see that clearly the lifetime value of the customer is very important to you.
Very important.
Everything you were doing with the returns. Let's take a look at one more lesson here. You said every brand should have a battle cry, and you learned this from John Emmerling. How did you learn this, and what was your battle cry?
Yeah, John Emmerling was he still is an incredible guy that was introduced to us by our designer. He was freelancing at the time. He had a Madison Avenue advertising agency back in the Madman days, and he was such a quirky guy. He would draw caricatures when you talk to him, and then he would show you the whole scene you were just in for the last hour. Just a very, very cool guy, an idea guy. And his big thing in his later years of his careers was all about the battle cry, and he would help companies with a 2-day session to come up with the right battle cry. And he's very proud of ours because, he's seen the impact his battle cry had on our company. And that's when let me back up a little bit before I go there. When we started our company, our sales process was broken. The customer would walk into the store and we would say, they were almost always look for, they wanted a shaving cream, usually, basic product. And we would have to tell them the best way to use our shaving cream is with a shaving brush. And then we would tell them, but if you buy the pre-shave oil, and then we had to show them all the different brushes that we sold, different qualities that we tell them about the pre-shave oil to start before you put the cream on. And then when you finish, you need your skin to heal and to look better with the aftershave balm. And we have 4 different aromas. It was a grueling process. And a lot of customers bought 1, 2, 3, sometimes the whole thing, but it was very fragmented. What John helped us to do is by helping us come up with the battle cry called the 4 elements of the perfect shave, which was our 4-step system: prepare, lather up, shade, and moisturize. It brought clarity to our entire brand, not only internally, but externally. We became laser focused, and we no longer sold hundreds of different products. We sold a system. Back then, we called it a regimen, a shaving regimen. We later on realized that we had created a shaving ritual and an experience. And the battle cry is basically a phrase that must be 10 words or less, that communicates your brand promise and must ring true when you hear it for the first time. And everyone must know it like their social security number is the 4th rule. And basically, our sales staff was not able to answer, what do you guys do here? Who are you? So think about a value proposition. Think about your 20-second elevator pitch. Well, the battle cry is an even more distilled version of all that. And as you can see from ours, it really tells you what we do. It's a 4-step system to the perfect shave. And we started to create these kits that were including the 4 elements, and we wrote 4 elements on it. Everything on our website was rebranded. And I remember one day, that was when I really knew that we were onto something. I was on the phone with the editor of GQ magazine, who I had never met. That was the first time we spoke. And I got on the phone and said, Eric, I love what you guys do. The 4 elements of the perfect shave. Prepare, lather up, shave, and moisturize. I'm like, oh, dude, this guy knows my battle cry by heart. And I've never met him. So I knew that was, and our business went vertical from that point on. Even we sold to all the department stores, but we sold products like that. Customers didn't understand. There was nobody to help them. We had this perfect shape box, one for $100, one for $25 to try it out. And we were selling. It was just an incredible tool to have a battle cry at that moment in life.
So you talk about that battle cry going viral, GQ knowing. Someone else that found out about this battle cry in this company was Procter Gamble, right? And ultimately, there was an exit from the company. They acquired it. So I wonder if you could walk us through it all. We talked about a lot of the key steps you did to build a company, to sell to individuals. It was a very, in the early days, we were very personal and one-to-one selling. Did any of these skills help you when it ultimately came to negotiate with a Fortune 25 company and to figure out how that worked out?
Yes and no. In my book, I call it On Train to Slay the Dragon, right? You wake up from a dream and you are the quarterback of the football team in the Super Bowl, but you've never played football before. That's basically M&A in a nutshell sometimes. Listen, two things. First of all, I knew I wanted to exit my business by a certain date and a certain amount, and we reached that. But once I made that decision, I never thought about it again. It was all about creating the most incredible company. Forget that. The rest will come to you. In 2005, something incredible happened, which is that Procter Gamble acquired Gillette's portfolio brand for $57 billion, which is still to this day the largest acquisition in consumer goods history. Okay. So not a small thing. The next month after the acquisition, they're launching the Fusion blade razor with 5 blades. Now, I don't know if you remember in those days when they were launching the Fusion blade, the press was very, very critical, almost mockingly critical. And not, they had the 2 blade, and the 3 blade, and the 4 blade. Now they have the 5 blades. It's like Rocky 7, right?
Yeah.
So we fitted our fancy razors with the Gillette heads. And when a new system came out, we would lose some sales because customers were waiting for us to have the new razors fitted into the handles. So I told my team, knowing that from past experience, I told my PR team, get me a sample of that blade so we can send it to our manufacturers and have them ready when they launch. When they have their $1 billion launch, we'll have the razors in our stores. Perfect plan. They called and they said, nobody can touch or see or hear about this product until it's launched. However, I think that if your CEO tried the razor and spoke in the media, it would go a long way to change the conversation around these 5 blades. So that was a huge opportunity. I flew to New York. I was in, it was like a CIA operation more than, more a PR thing. They wanted to be I'm like, you don't have to be in the bathroom with me. Just take my phone. I'm naked. I've got nothing on. Your secret's safe with me. I shaved with the razor and I was on CNN the next day telling them how much I love this razor. Frankly, I would have said I loved it even if it wasn't good, but it was great. And that's not authentic, but I didn't have to go there. Yeah, I wouldn't have done that. I'm joking. It was incredible. That razor was the smoothest razor I've ever had. I went on CNN, spoke greatly about it. Who was watching me? The president of Procter & Gamble in charge of men's grooming. Who is this kid talking about our $1 billion launch here? Next thing you know, his executives come down to Miami to speak with us, and we become the first company to ever license the Gillette brand in the history of the company. There's never been another one. We're the only one, the first and only ever to license, which was a great honor for us, right? This was like we were being recruited to the big leagues, if you will. We collaborate. We have this beautiful Fusion Chrome collection, co-branded Gillette and the Art of Shaving, that launches to the marketplace, the premium marketplace. We do very well with the razor. And in 2008, the president of Procter and Gamble asked me if we are interested in selling them our company. So that was early 2008. That started the process of this M&A. And then, it was a big journey. I mean, the next 14 months were a wild ride because of the financial crisis. But it started with, against my better judgment, because I was insecure in that category, I leaned on our investors at the time, and they recommended I hire Goldman Sachs. I told them I thought we were too small for Goldman, too small of a fish for them. We're not going to get the right, I like to have medium-sized banks that I could work with one of the principals instead of a humongous bank where I would be given to the receptionist to handle my M&A deal, which was big for me, but tiny for them. Anyways, I hired Goldman. They really gave me a B-level team. They ran a bad process. I gave him a great brand. I gave him a great buyer. Just bring it together, add water, get it to closing, dragging their feet. Next thing you know, we finally get into, after they messed up the deal, I brought the buyer back to the table. By the time we got into due diligence in October 2008, in the middle of due diligence with P&G people in my offices in Miami, Lehman Brothers collapses, taking the stock market down with it. Retail sales dropped 25% overnight in Q4 of 2008, the most important selling season for us. And, they're packing their, imagine them packing their folders and running to their cars, is not the look I want in the middle of my deal. This is an 8 or 9 figure deal, and I don't want these guys to be bolting out of my office. The deal's off the table. The world is upside down. Our company's tanking with everyone else in the world. My wife is 6 months pregnant. I'm pretty stressed, right? We're running out of cash. I mean, we have a $3.5 million hole in our cash flow that we were expecting from Q4. By January, our investors who still had money to invest in our business earmarked for us refused to put any more money in. I think they gave us, I think we went from an $80 million valuation with them. They wanted to revalue the company at $1 million. And give us $500,000 for 6 years. I don't know. They wanted to take my company, basically. To which I politely told them to, go fuck themselves. Sorry. You can beep me out, but that's the only thing I could say at that moment.
That's the authentic thing. We're not beeping it out, but go on.
Yeah. They thought I was a nice guy until then. And they really saw how I can be a formidable adversary. Meanwhile, our bank, Merrill Lynch, who we had a few $1 million line of credit with, was acquired by Bank of America for pennies on the dollar. Bank of America starts to foreclose on our $3 million line of credit, even though I showed them, listen, I have this huge offer from Procter Gamble. I had money in my bank. I can, worst case, I'm going to pay you if the deal doesn't go through in a month. Give me 2 months. Anyways, they go through that, and P&G, weeks away from signing the deal, find out that we're insolvent, that we're being foreclosed on, and that our investors don't have our back. So they were good old Midwestern values. They didn't try to really, kill us, which I wouldn't have allowed, but they did retrade our deal in the tune of $20 million, and including an earnout. So that was a hard pill to swallow, but I still got the deal done. It was good enough. At the end of the day, the only reason for me not to do the deal is because I didn't think I could get the earnout, and I could get more in a year or 2 years from that, which I had no, greed was not my driving principle at that point. I wanted freedom, and I was getting enough money to buy my freedom. Not as much as I wanted or I thought I was going to get, but that's life, right? Nobody cries about my situation, but I'm just telling you, it was a hard pill to swallow. $20 million is not, chump change. we got the deal done. And, it was an extremely stressful period, fighting with my investors to the last minute. And then the next morning, I had an 18-month contract with Procter to continue running my company and get my earnout, which was substantial. I mean, it was a $25 million earnout, of which I would get, 80+% of it. So it was really, I sold my company, but, what they say, the one battle was behind me, but the war was still raging on, if you will, for the next 18 months. I had to get that earnout. So that's really a little bit of the tale of M&A. And then in my book and in my life, I talk about what we call the morning after. So after leaving my company 2 years later, the morning after is where, what the lucky entrepreneurs find themselves after selling their company. Now what? You wake up the next morning, you're out of a job, you've got a pile of money and whatever your situation is. And a lot of entrepreneurs suffer from mental health issue at that point, loss of identity, loss of purpose, confusion, and that can be a very difficult period for which, again, they get very little empathy because they're living the dream from the outside looking.
Let's end on a high note, though, and get back to where we began, because the first word you told me was fun. So I understand there's those things to overcome, but let me just ask, is freedom fun?
Freedom is the most fun thing anyone can aspire to. I think that people are confused. They're chasing money, but what you should be chasing is freedom. And that was my decision about taking the deal at the end. Is this going to allow me to have freedom over my time, over my life? And the answer was yes. And therefore, I went through with it. So yeah, freedom is a lot of fun. It could be challenging at times because there were periods where I had too much freedom, right? I had a lot of white space in my calendar. I was raising my kids and, I didn't know what I was going to do. If you're in real estate or you're a doctor, you go find other properties, you find another hospital, you find another cabinet. But an entrepreneur, I'm not going to go and start the art of grooming the next day. I had no intention of that. What am I going to be? And I realized at that point that, I'm very analytical and strategic. So I treat everything in my life like that, like a business. And I ask myself, okay, so what do I want? What am I going to do with all this freedom? What's the purpose of my wealth? What's the purpose of my time that I have available? What's the opportunity of selling my business and being in this new position? And I realized, first of all, there's what you want, maybe. And there's what is in front of you, right? Usually what's in front of you is really the clues. We're treasure hunters, right? So the clues are right in front of you. And, as I was asking myself that the morning after, there was a baby crying in the other room. And I realized, listen, my priorities are very clear. I've neglected my health. My father wasn't around growing up. And I've come into a nice chunk of money. And those three things became my priority. My health, I'm going to focus on my health. I'm going to focus on my kids, and I'm going to focus on my investments. And this became my job for the first 5 to 10 years.
Well, normally I end an episode by asking what are the key qualities of an effective marketer, but for this one, I think that's too good of an end. I love that. So I love that end of don't chase money, chase freedom. I think that's a lesson we can all learn from, no matter marketing, entrepreneurship, life. That's a fantastic lesson. Well, I thank you so much for your time today, Eric. I learned so much.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me.
And thank you to everyone for listening.
Thank you for joining us for How I Made It in Marketing with Daniel Burstein. Now that you've gotten inspiration for transforming yourself as a marketer, get some ideas for your next marketing campaign from Marketing Sherpa's extensive library of free case studies at marketingsherpa.com. That's marketing, SHERPA.com.